Still with me in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangat, and now joining us as well, legal expert and political analyst Daniel Pomerantz, the CEO of Reality Check. I don't know how many times I've seen footage of that hearing, and still it's shocking to hear someone talking about something being context dependent. It hurts to actually hear these words from somebody leading an elite institution like she does. What did you make, A, of the resignation, and B, at the attempt to walk it back before that happened?
Yeah, it does indeed hurt. It's a little bit gaslighty, as psychologists might say. I don't make much of the resignation because she's still a tenured professor at the university and will remain there. It's not like she lost her job. She just left that particular position. And of course, there are the other university presidents who testified before Congress are still in their presidential positions, not to mention the many campuses that didn't testify that also probably should be in the spotlight. And, you know, most of that 5-hour hearing was softball questions and giving the presidents the opportunity to say, well, we object to all forms of racism. It was only when Congresswoman Stefanik stepped in and really took a hard position that the truth came out. The truth is that these campuses, not just Penn, but all of them, for the last 2 months since October 7th, have not been protecting their Jewish students. So by the time they got to Congress, there was nothing that they could say. Congresswoman Stefanik was asking Liz McGill and the others, does this violate your policies? Now, if they would have said, yes, it does, then the next question is, then why didn't you stop it in violation of your own policies?
Why?
If they say, no, it doesn't, then the question is, why doesn't it? So there's no good answer that they can give. But the problem isn't the rhetoric. The problem is their behavior over the last 2 months. And legally, this isn't about free speech. These are calls for incitement to violence, which ended up resulting in actual violence. As we saw in that clip, the student was saying they were boarded up in the library while people were attacking and they were in fear for their safety. That is not supposed to happen at all on a campus environment.
Do you think now that there will be an impact at Harvard and MIT as well? Is there more pressure for their presidents to at least resign?
There will be some pressure. I don't know if it will happen. What we have to understand here is that this didn't start on October 7th. This started, in my opinion, there can be different opinions, but in my opinion, started with the conference in Durban, South Africa in 2001, when the Palestinians announced they would launch what they called a diplomatic intifada. And for 20 years, they invested, not just Palestinians, but Palestinians and their allies, such as Qatar, invested hundreds of billions of dollars and 20 years of work in building an environment in which they paid for endowments for professorships. They supported NGOs and nonprofit organizations. What we're seeing here is not organic and it's not spontaneous. It was built up internationally over the course of 20 years, and we're just now seeing the results. And in fairness to the campus presidents, they're just responding to the environment that exists on campus. That whole environment has to change, not just the presidents.
What does it take to change something like that? We're looking at decades, if not longer.
Absolutely. We're looking at decades, if not longer. Our goal here shouldn't be what can we do in the next day or in the next week. Our goal should be what can we do to make sure our children and our grandchildren can go to college in safety. Once we start thinking in that kind of long-term way and really investing for the long term, that's when we can start making a positive difference. I've noticed, we've noticed that a number of donors to these universities have been pulling their donations. That's part of why some of these resignations have happened. Why that didn't happen 10 years ago, 20 years ago. This action was happening on campus for years, and yet many donors, including Jewish donors, have nonetheless been funding these campuses until it became so obvious after October 7th that it had to stop. Well, we have to remember that even when the drama of these months dies down, that problem still exists, and we have a responsibility to monitor what happens on campus, to be cautious about how we donate and condition our donations to make sure our grandchildren will have a safe environment.
Certainly a long road ahead. Eitan, your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with all the things that were raised here. Again, I started and I say the money here is the main game changer.
There are a lot of these campus groups are supported by NGOs. Those NGOs are well funded. Reality Check, my organization, is an NGO, and I've always joked I could get so much more funding if I would just switch teams. and be anti-Israel because the money's out there. We've got to make that change. My organization and organizations like mine need to be able to find a hospitable environment to be able to get the funding we need to do this work. The anti-Israel groups have been acting almost entirely unopposed. Most of the work that's done for Israel on campus is by private individuals out of their pockets. That's what has to change.
A long road ahead. Daniel Pomerantz, thank you so much. Eitan Dangot, as always, appreciate your insights. Much to discuss, much to unpack. A very disturbing situation, but we do appreciate your insights as always. Thank you.
My pleasure.